All right, I'd like to focus in a little bit on the oscilloscope. The oscilloscope is a voltage measuring device, and it has two input channels, so you can look at two different waveforms at any particular point in time. And there's essentially five function areas in the oscilloscope. One is the display. All right, the display gives you information about everything that's going on. All you need to know is in the display area. All right, so that's the first area. The second area is the triggering area. There's a little section here called trigger, and that triggering section, you can see this waveform is kind of jumping around a little bit, and so what I'm going to do is press the trigger button. The trigger button gives me some soft menu keys here, and so it's saying the trigger source is channel 1, but I haven't got anything on channel 1, and so my input signal's coming in channel 2, so I'm going to select channel 2, and you can see, bang, there it is. It triggers beautifully. There's a little button, there's a little triangle, a little red triangle right here that tells you that's where the trigger event is occurring. So right now I'm triggering essentially at a 0-volt level with a positive slope. So if you look at the, you've got our trigger source, we've got a trigger slope. We look at the trigger slope and say, okay, if I want to go from a rising edge to a falling edge, you see that the trigger event now goes to a negative slope as opposed to a positive slope. So I can adjust that trigger either from rising or falling. So I look at a trigger level, I look at a trigger slope, and that tells you where the trace begins. And it always begins wherever this triangle is. All right, so the main area is the display, second area is the triggering, the third area is the horizontal sensitivity. The horizontal sensitivity tells you how many seconds it takes for the trace to get across the screen. For example, we can adjust that so that it looks at a smaller and smaller time period, so you can blow up the function that you're looking at, or you can adjust it such that it looks at longer and longer times so that you might be able to see any variations that happen over time. So the horizontal sensitivity controls the rate at which it displays the signal. So we'll set that back to a reasonable level, and then we have the next function block, and that is the vertical sensitivity. Vertical sensitivity, channel 2. Right now we've got this set at 1 volt per division. I can adjust that to 500 millivolts per division, meaning I'm increasing what I'm looking at. So I'm being more sensitive. Or I can adjust that down to 2 volts per division, which means I'm looking at a bigger picture. So the vertical sensitivity gives you an indication of how many volts per division is along the section. The last function block is the measurement function block. And right now we've got a signal on there. I'm going to put these cursors can be placed in, and I can adjust this cursor maybe to that peak value, and I'll go, that's cursor X1, I'll look at cursor X2, and I'll say there's another cursor, and so I can put that at the peak value there, and down here you get readouts that tell you exactly what cursor, where the cursor is, and it tells you what the difference is. And so you can see that this is at a 1 kilohertz signal because of the time difference between those two cursors. So you can use the cursors to make measurements. There are measurement functions on here that says, okay, look at the types of measurements that I can make. I can make peak-to-peak amplitude measurements. I can make maximum measurements. I can make minimum measurements, and I can adjust that up and down to RMS quantities, average quantities, all kinds of different measurement capabilities. And I like peak-to-peak function, so I just accept that one and say, there we are. I'm going to be happy with that. All right, so that's the oscilloscope, the 5 basic function areas of the oscilloscope. You'll be learning a little bit about each of those function areas so that you can use the oscilloscope to measure any signal that you want, so you get more detail about what's happening as a function of time, as a function of voltage, and you can make measurement with it. All right, that's it for today.